what is going to happen with home prices as we move forward in the real estate market here in Anchorage? Are we seeing any parts of the real estate market where there's some softening up, where we might see prices starting to come down a little bit? My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska. My mission, as always, is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. Kind of think of me as your first friend in Alaska, and today we're going to be talking about what is going on in the real estate market, looking at the single-family residential, the condo, and multifamily. Before we get started with that, though, give this video a like, all that good stuff, and let's go and jump into today's market update. Now, the first thing we want to know when we're looking at the single-family asset class, when we're looking at real estate here, is what is going on as far as the inventory. Well, this time last year, we had about 290 odd homes available on the market, and now we're seeing there's just over 300. So we're seeing a small uptick in the inventory that's available, which, I mean, we kind of just take what we can get. You know, that's not a huge moving the needle one way or the other, but it's still something. Usually around this time of year, though, we would expect to see somewhere in the 750, about 800 range for the number of properties that are available on the market. So we got a long ways to go, but we've also had years where we've had way less inventory. So just take the wins where we can get them. The next thing we want to look at when we're looking at the single family market is what's going on as far as the number of properties that are actually selling. So this time last year, there was about 172 properties in Anchorage that sold. This year, it's about 194. So you do see a slight uptick in the number of properties that are selling as well, which does kind of speak to the continued demand we have for properties in Anchorage. Even though inventory is low, and I think everyone's just kind of accepted, inventory is probably going to stay where it's at for the foreseeable future. We'll talk about why that is in the summary. The next thing we see is that the average sold price went from about $480,000 this time last year to date, and it went up to $512,000 this year, which means we're seeing about a 6.7% increase for the average sold price for single family properties here in Anchorage. Now, this isn't that big of a surprise, honestly. Like, as long as the inventory does remain pretty compressed down and pretty small, that's just going to be kind of the reality, I think, moving forward. But you know, let's check and see what we've seen in previous years here, just to see if that's in keeping with the trend. You know, the year before, year to date, this time last year in 2023, we went up by about 5.2%. Year before that in 2022 went up by 7.6%. In the year before that in 2021 is about 6.9%. So 6.7, that's kind of just the average. So it's not a big swing one way or the other. So that's kind of just what we can see there, and we'll talk about why that is in the summary, why we're not seeing a softening up of prices right this minute, even though everyone has told me, hey, the affordability, I can't keep doing this. Why are the prices still going up? Well, we'll talk about why that is in the summary. In the meantime, though, let's talk about what's going on in the condo market. So the condo market is one of those few markets in the entire makeup of the real estate inventory here in Anchorage, where we've actually seen a pretty significant uptick in the number of properties that are available compared to the year before. This time last year, we saw about 84 properties available on the market. Now it's about 137. Now, that sounds really good, and it is, because any movement upwards as far as the inventory goes, within reason, we don't want a glut of inventory, because then that makes it very difficult. You know, that makes it not a great market overall for the market if you're wanting to buy into it. But what we see is that this time of year, we would normally see around, you know, about 380 to about 450. So still an increase, still a ways to go to improve to where we were before COVID happened and everything that happened to our market at that point. The next thing I want to know for condos is how many condos have actually sold for the month that we have the most up-to-date information for, which is November. And we see that this time last year, 49 condos sold on the market, and this year it is 69 sold for the month of November. So we are still seeing a pretty healthy uptick in the rate at which homes or condos are selling. So that does speak to the continued demand we have for condos in Anchorage. Last but not least, we see the average sold price went from about $270 this time last year, year to date, to about $279,000 this year, for about a 3.2% increase for the average sold price for condos. So this is actually a nice improvement compared to what we historically saw for the condo market in Anchorage. Just to give you an idea, Going back to 2017, we actually saw about a negative 1% increase for the average sold price, negative 1% in 2018. We saw about a 1% increase in 2019. In 2020, we saw about a 2.7% increase. And 2021, it shot up to about 6.3%. For 2023, the price actually shot up by about 11. And now we're settling back down to only increasing by about 3.1%. So that's, believe it or not, that's actually kind of favorable, because I know everyone thinks that they want the prices just to crash and now you can jump in there and get a good deal. But do you really want to own an asset that has that much volatility to it? I don't know about you. I am perfectly fine spending a little bit more time waiting to save up to purchase something that's a lot more stable, so I'm not worried about riding this roller coaster every day of my life after I own that asset. So this is actually a good thing that we're seeing kind of a leveling out. So it's not going up by about 11% for the average sold price for condos, because that's nuts. That's not sustainable. But also, I don't want to see the price of these things going down either, because if I'm looking at purchasing something in this asset class, I want to know I'm going to buy it and the value is actually going to go up. All right, let's go and take a break real quick here. For those who've been watching for a little bit, you do know that I host a podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast for people who've recently moved up here and people who've lived up here for a while. And these folks get on there and kind of share their stories about what it's like living here, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So if you're trying to get a good sense for Alaska, that's going to be a great place to go check it out. The place you can go get the link for that podcast is going to be in the description section down below. Now, let's go ahead and finish up today's market update, looking at the multifamily market. Now, looking to the multifamily market, we see that this time last year, we had about 85 multifamily properties available on the market, and now we're seeing there's 95. Now, that's an increase. It's kind of a similar story across all the asset classes. So that is an increase, and we're going to take the wins where we can get them. Usually around this time of year, though, we would expect to see right around 150 upwards to like maybe 220, maybe 250 or so. So, 95, that's still an improvement. Still a long ways off from where the average is, though. Next thing we see, looking at the number of properties that have actually sold, we see that this time last year, there were about 15 multifamily properties that sold for the month of November. And this year, we're seeing it is 25. So that's obviously proportionally a pretty big uptick. And also what we're seeing along with that is that does bring us about into the average of what we would historically see around this time of November. So even though the inventory is less than half of what it normally is, we're still seeing the same number of sales happening as we had before, which does really speak to Anchorage continuing to be a place that does appeal to a lot of investors, and we'll kind of talk more about that in the summary. Last, we see that the average sold price for multifamily properties year to date, I'm just going to read these off and then we'll dissect it a little bit. The average sold price went from about $501,000 to about $596,000 this year, which means there's about a 19% increase for the average sold price. Now, keep in mind, multifamily includes everything from like the little duplex all the way up to like the commercial 50-unit commercial property. Okay, it includes a lot. And so what probably happened is we had one of those larger, more commercial grade properties come and sell that, sold for a couple million or something like that. And it's kind of throwing all the averages off here. That being said, though, I still would not be surprised if we saw an increase for the average sold price, because there is a pretty steady increase for the value for investors up here, just because there is limited space in Anchorage, but people still do want to live here just because this is where most people do work in South Central Alaska. And that being the case, limited space, limited places you can build where people can actually live. And you're going to start seeing the scarcity and the basic economics happen, and the prices do start going up for those rents, which does directly correlate to how valuable the investment property is, because then you charge more for rent and everything else. That being said, though, rents also do go up because of property taxes and a lot of other things that are kind of outside their control. Now, let's go ahead and go back in time a little bit and look at some of these average year-to-dates. So this time last year, we see the average sold price actually took a dip of about 1.5%. Year before in 2022, it increased by about 2%. In 2021, it increased by 15%. And in 2020, it actually increased by about 4%. So average sold price is really all over the place if you're looking at investment properties in Anchorage. So the best thing I can tell you, just look at the property specifically, make sure that it performs, and make sure that luck has nothing to do with your plan moving forward, okay? Make sure you plan for everything to go wrong, like the tenants not to be paying, and there to be big repairs you have to do and still be okay. If that's not where you're at, it's going to cause you a lot of heartburn. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the summary. Well, in summary, if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at this market, I know that it feels daunting because it's like, the prices just keep going up and up and up on these single family homes. And, am I ever going to be able to own a home? And believe me, I understand the feeling. But also keep in mind, this is actually going to be something, seeing the prices going up and up and up, this is going to be something you're going to want to see longer than you're not going to want to see it. In other words, once you actually purchase something and you're in the club and you own the real estate, you're going to be pretty happy to see these prices continuing to appreciate, and for good reason. Why would you spend all this money and get into real estate just to expect to see this constant fluctuating up and down, which really that's not what we see up here in this real estate market. It's pretty steady. It doesn't usually, barring like a worldwide epidemic, it usually doesn't just shoot up the way that it did the past couple of years, which is good. Slow and steady wins the race, and I am perfectly fine seeing about a 3 to about 5.5% increase for the average sold price, because that means, barring anything huge happening, we're not going to see a big collapse anytime soon, which, if you're a property owner, that's a good thing. If you're wanting to be a property owner in the future, believe me, that's a good thing. So when you purchase, there's not a very good chance that the value of the thing is going to suddenly just fall out the bottom and you're just completely out of luck. Now, for condos, what I'm seeing in this market, it's kind of the same thing as the residential side, with the exception that this is one of those few instances in the condo markets in Anchorage where there's still a shortage and there's still a lot of demand because people are looking for affordable home options. And for the first time in decades, we actually seem to have a shortage of condos, and everyone who was sitting on condos for the longest time just trying to sell them, you couldn't get rid of them, there's a glut of inventory. Now suddenly they're all going quiet. And it's like, you guys complained for so long that you couldn't sell your condo, and now you have an opportunity, and now you're just clamming up. It's like, if you really want to sell this thing, you're going to do it right now, because you just don't know if this shortage is going to continue forever. It's not a good assumption to have. As far as the investors, I've said this before, just make sure all your numbers really do balance out. Really do make sure you budget for the stuff you can't expect. Have a big pot just sitting there to take care of all the emergencies that inevitably are going to come up, and you're going to have a much better time of it. And however much margin you think you have, budget more in there. And believe me, it's just going to make your life a whole lot less stressful. But this has been your market update talking about Anchorage. I hope it's been useful. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you're looking at buying, selling, or investing in Anchorage, I want to help you. I happen to be a real estate broker. Reach out to me and let's do business. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.